Maine-owned, Maine-operated. Customer-owned, customer-operated. A Maine power delivery utility with no ability, much less incentive, to funnel hundreds of millions of dollars per year out of the state and out of the country. A Maine power delivery utility that purchases at a fair price the assets of CMP and Emera Maine and shakes their hands and says respectfully, goodbye. A Maine power delivery utility financed at lower rates with no tax dollars that reduces rates and improves reliability. A Maine power delivery utility that is accountable to Maine and to Maine only. Today, standing together for Maine Power, we are CMP and Emera Maine customers, line workers, business leaders, community organizations, and legislators of every political party. In passing our bill, Maine would follow the lead of Nebraska and other areas where customers own their utility directly. The bill would create a new Maine Power Delivery Authority outside of state government and wholly owned by its customers. Maine Power would purchase Maine's two for-profit monopoly utilities, CMP and Emera Maine, and would reduce rates by refinancing those assets. This is a key concept, and I want to refer you here to the handout, which includes color charts and another handout that has an overview of the proposal. It's essential that folks understand this is not magic, it's not sleight of hand. We are refinancing at different interest rates. That's all it is. And that's how we reduce rates. And therefore, it makes sense that this next statistic would also be true. According to the the American Public Power Association, 1 in 7 Americans is currently served by a consumer-owned utility. And on average, those customers pay 15% less and are without power for less than half the time endured by customers of investor-owned utilities like Central Maine Power. The rural state of Nebraska is the only state with 100% consumer-owned power. Just so happens that Nebraska had the best reliability in the nation in 2017 and among the lowest rates. Maine, in contrast, had the worst reliability in the nation that year and among the highest rates. Maine people want and deserve a utility that will keep the costs down and the lights on and put its Maine customers and workers first. Our current utilities have failed us in every respect, with the clear exception of our own consumer-owned utilities. You see, in some parts of Maine, such as Kennebunk, Madison, Houlton, and Calais, small consumer-owned utilities, or COUs, already exist. Like the larger COUs elsewhere, these utilities have consistently delivered power at lower rates with fewer and shorter outages. Importantly, COUs do not use tax dollars. One of our colleagues, Senator Marianne Moore of Calais, a Republican, could not be here today, but wanted me to share this statement with you. Quote, being a member of Eastern Maine Electric Cooperative, I have observed the dedication of management and the board in holding costs down. As for reliability, Eastern Maine Electric Cooperative has an aggressive maintenance program to prevent outages during storms. In my humble opinion, a similar consumer-owned power company might be very beneficial to the rest of Maine, given the state's challenges with costs and reliability. By purchasing CMP and Emera Maine using revenue bonds, Maine Power Delivery would reduce annual costs to Maine customers and businesses by as much as $325 million per year. That's money that would stay here, circulating in our economy and in our pockets. How is this possible? It's simple. It's like refinancing a house at a lower interest rate. Right now, we pay 10 to 12% to CMP's overseas investors. Instead, we could pay 3% or so and keep the difference in our pockets and our local economy. And I refer you again to the sheet and the graph. There are more copies over here. When New York's legislature created the consumer-owned Long Island Power Authority, it led to a 20% reduction in rates immediately in 1998. Overseen by parent companies based in Spain and in Nova Scotia, the fiduciary responsibility of CMP and Emera Maine is to their multinational investors. A profit to the investors is considered a required part of their monopoly rate making. And unfortunately, last summer, CMP's own CEO, Doug Herling, truthfully called CMP, quote, the most mistrusted company in Maine. A recent audit report found over 100,000 billing errors had occurred, with new errors cropping up daily. Despite CMP denials of any issues, the Maine PUC voted unanimously in early January to continue and intensify the investigation. Now is the time to control our energy destiny. As transportation and heating are increasingly turning to the electricity system, and as the security and reliability of our grid becomes more and more crucial, we cannot afford to wait. The power of Maine people has always been in our independence and our self-reliance. We can be put down, but we will not be kept down. As Bruce Springsteen once said, when they said sit down, I stood up. Today we stand up. We stand up for Maine. We stand up for Maine power delivery. And I want to introduce three folks who are going to speak. I'll introduce them one at a time, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. The first to speak, let me see if I remember correctly the order here. I think we said we were going to have Christy. Come on up. Right, all right, come on over. And let me just introduce Christy. She'll introduce herself as well, but she is the founder and one of the admins of CMP Ratepayers Unite, which has over 7,000 members.
Hi there. Just bear with me, I'm very nervous. I've never spoken to the press before. But hi, I'm Christy Pottle. I'm a resident of Belfast. I feel like it's my duty to speak up for the ratepayers that can't be here. My story began about a year ago when I opened a January bill from CMP for a small cape in the amount of $653, and that was just for 1 month of usage. Since then, we've had other high bills, but that was the first one that was ever that high. It was very shocking. I couldn't believe that the bill was so high and wondered what I could do about it. I heard of others on social media with the same issue of ridiculously high bills, and that's when I created the Facebook group CMP Ratepayers Unite. Within 1 week, hundreds of people had joined. Within 1 month, it was more than 1,000. We knew something was wrong. Now the group has 7,000 members, and that doesn't include the countless number of ratepayers who aren't on Facebook or the internet that are being overcharged. You wouldn't believe some of the stories people have been sharing. They're very sad and very disturbing. Thousands of Mainers are terrified their power will be shut off because of bills that they don't deserve and cannot afford. To people who are excessively overcharged, like Buddy, who's here, charged $1,400 for a family of 3 for just 1 month of usage. People who had to call over a dozen times to get nowhere and get very lame excuses from CMP. To small businesses drowning in electricity bills that are thousands more than usual. To CMP disconnecting the town of Newcastle for not paying a bill that they had paid. To a seasonal island home where power had been shut off and they received a record high bill. The stories are so numerous, I could go on and on. The Utilities Commission is concerned and stated that the ratepayers need to be able to trust the accuracy of their bills, and that is why a full investigation of CMP is in progress. But will that be enough? I don't think so. According to a recent independent audit, we now know that more than 100,000 CMP ratepayers have experienced billing errors, and thousands, probably more, of meters still have known defects. It's become very clear that CMP is not accountable to ratepayers, just to their own excessive profits. And it's not just CMP. Other investor-owned utilities, like Emera, are accountable to their investors, not to the ratepayers. Last week, Emera announced a 19% rate hike. It's high time for a change. It's time for Mainers to put our investor-owned electric utilities back in the hands of consumers. Consumer-owned power has been in Maine for a long time and continues to flourish today in places from Kennebunk to Van Buren and as far down east as Calais. And it works all over the country with an average of 15% lower rates and more reliable power. Our state is facing some serious challenges. Lots of folks struggle to keep the heat on in the winter and pay their basic bills. And we are also facing severe weather due to climate change and need to upgrade the grid to accommodate. I believe now is the time to put power delivery back in the hands of the people, and that's why I'm supporting this bill. And just a shout out to all the amazing administrators for CMP, Ratepayers Unite. It's a huge group. And there's Lauren here, and Jude back here, and Michael, and Pat's been so helpful, and Valerie's here, and so many people, and buddies. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Christy. And we have up next Dick Rogers. Dick is the business manager at IBEW Local 1837 and represents the workers of Central Maine Power and Emera Maine. Dick.
Thank you, sir. I'll be a lot shorter. I feel like a fish out of water as well. I'd rather either be up north snowmobiling or having a root canal. But it's important to be here. I've been the business manager now for 8 years, an employee of Central Maine Power for 38 years. I've seen the changes that have come and tried to push back where I could. We represent approximately 1,600 members in Maine and New Hampshire. I'm here today to say that 1837 supports the consideration and any and all initiatives, including the proposed Maine Power Delivery Bill, that would reposition Maine utilities. IBEW 1837 believes that the current structure and workforce model here in Maine has had a significant negative impact on all the employee, union and non-union, and more importantly, the ratepayers of Maine. The union is committed to participating in the process to ensure that the employees and the ratepayers' interests are at the forefront of any proposed legislation. I also have a position paper here which I'm more than willing to share, but short and sweet, that's where we stand.
Thank you, Dick. And last but certainly not least, we have Rick Savage. Rick is a business owner, and he can tell you more about his businesses. He's from Bethel. We're very pleased to have Rick with us today.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Rick Savage, and along with my brother Ron, we own 5 different companies. We're both veterans and Republicans. We own Sunday River Brewing Company, Savage Country Store, Mahoosic Realty, Savage Land Development, and Condo Maintenance Services. We're here today in strong support of taking back our power and keeping more of our money here in Maine. In my work as a developer, I deal with Central Maine Power on a daily basis. To be honest, it's like dealing with the mafia. We are sending hundreds of millions of dollars overseas every year for no reason. Businesses like mine have no choice. We have to use CMP. We have to pay for 100% of our infrastructure. Customers have no choice. It's crazy. Governor LePage was right when he said, power costs are too high here in Maine. The reason for these rising costs is for the profit monopoly utilities, CMP and Emera Maine. This bill will solve that problem. Consumer-owned utilities work in Nebraska, LA, Long Island, and right here in places like Madison, Maine. I used to buy power from Madison Electric when I lived up that way. A big difference from Central Maine Power. They attracted Backyard Farms, which grows tomatoes, which we buy for our restaurant. They're awesome. And they got there because of cheap power, and they employ a lot of people. Creating the Maine Power Delivery Authority will reduce cost to businesses like mine, put the control back in our hands, and put money back in the pockets of Maine people. I ask my fellow business owners, my fellow conservatives, and all elected representatives to support this important bill. It's time for our power of delivery to be controlled from Maine, not from Spain. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. And who doesn't like a good tomato? Backyard farm. This is a moment for questions, and if there's a question that I can't answer, I'll try to direct somebody behind me who maybe can. Any questions from the media? Yes,
Yeah, can you just touch on, would this bill force these companies to sell, or? I mean,
The sale would be required, and it would be at a fair price. Yes.
What's your best estimate of a fair price of these utilities?
So net book value of those assets is on file at the PUC and at FERC. They're filed regularly for rate making purposes. And the key concept here is we'd be refinancing that value at a lower rate. We're already paying for it, we're just paying too much.
What are those values, do you know?
The overall value would, it's, as I said, is on file at the PUC. It is significant, but the important point is you're refinancing at a lower rate. I'll give you an example. In 1998, the Long Island Power Authority was created. Billions of dollars worth of assets were changed hands to the Long Island Power Authority, and rates went down 20%. So you're simply refinancing the asset.
Can you just talk about that process of how you're refinancing or using bonds?
Yep, so no tax money is at stake. I know we said that before, but I really think that's important for people to understand. Consumer-owned utilities cannot use taxes. And importantly, we don't have to pay their taxes. Right now, part of the rates for Central Maine Power and Emera Maine is us paying the profits and the taxes for their investors. So we get rid of all of that. We keep that money here in Maine. The sale is effected through a simple legislative requirement. We currently allow CMP and Emera Maine monopoly franchise, and by directing the sale of those assets to the Maine Power Delivery Authority, we would be doing something much like what was done about 20 years ago when the state of Maine decided that the utilities had to sell their generation assets. At that time, all generation, all supply was sold off because of a legislative mandate by the incumbent utilities. That created a free market for supply and generation, and that's a good thing. We want to protect that free market. Unfortunately, the delivery of power has to be a monopoly. And so the question is, should a monopoly be for profit? And should a monopoly be foisted upon the consumers of Maine, where they have zero choice and they have to pay exorbitant rates? We say no.
So you're talking about, obviously, borrowing billions of dollars, correct?
We're currently paying much higher interest rates under our current structure. We are effectively borrowing in order to pay for guaranteed profits of between 10 and 13% to CMP and Emera Maine stockholders.
Right.
That is a problem.
Right. But you're reluctant to use the dollar figure because there's several questions been asked.
The total amount it's significant, but the point is if you're in a house, your house costs a lot, and you probably couldn't pay for your house out of pocket. That's why you get a mortgage. If somebody came along and said, you know what, I can cut your mortgage to a quarter of the interest rate you're paying now over the same term, I think you'd probably say yes. That's what we're doing here. Other questions?
So the follow-up, you mentioned that no tax money involved, but is there any element of risk, because you'd be essentially through a revenue bond, pledges the credit of the state of Maine behind it, correct?
So I think if you look at what's happening with PG&E right now out in California, the risk ultimately always falls on the ratepayers. I mean, the reality is that utilities get what utilities want in rate making across the country. There are very few examples of where they have not been able to use the ratepayer or sometimes the taxpayer as a backstop. This bill does away with that profit motive. It does away with the required forking over of hundreds of millions of dollars to out-of-state and out-of-country investors. And that's the bottom line. We're running our own utility and we're doing it for cheaper. The reason that 1 in 7 Americans who have consumer-owned power are paying 15% less is simple math. Any other questions? Yes,
I have 2 questions. First, for the gentleman from the union, a little root canal for you. You said the union supports consideration of this. That's nothing short of support of a state takeover of poles and wires, correct?
Just short of that. I've been involved since.
Can you step up to the mic, Chris?
Yep, sure. I've been involved since the beginning and listening and watching, but I owe it to my members to wait and see what this final bill looks like, right? Any new bill, I don't know what it's going to look like. So before I just jump off full both feet in, I've got to step back and just watch and at least see what the final bill looks like.
Yeah,
As it stands now, I think that it has benefits. I think that my members have struggled for the past several years with not enough help, okay? Back office help. This isn't just your line workers or your field people. This is people in the office. We struggle to get the work done. The recent billing issues have been a real problem. My members have seen it. We've brought it to the company's attention. We need these problems addressed. Not enough linemen is certainly a problem. My guys are working one weekend after another. They're being forced onto duties because we just don't have enough people. So it's a real struggle for our guys, men and women.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Mr. Chairman, you mentioned and your documents also say that consumer-owned utilities are twice as reliable as investor-owned. The information I've seen from the EIA indicates that's true of public power authorities, but not of CMUs. So can you provide the documentation for that?
I would be happy to provide that. It's from the American Public Power Association, and they have a figure of 59 minutes without power per year for the average COU customer, and of 133 minutes for the average investor-owned.
Okay, so that's one snapshot.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It may be a definitional issue, but we'll follow up. Other questions?
I've got
Yes.
two. One is, you referenced the consumer-owned utilities in Maine, but they depend on the infrastructure of the large utility to get their electricity in large part, don't they?
So, to some extent, they do, and that's been a frustration. Kennebunk, many residents in Kennebunk came to us asking to be part of Kennebunk Light and Power because they saw that the lights were on in that district when theirs next door was not. And unfortunately, CMP really fought that tooth and nail. The transmission infrastructure is the cash cow for the investor-owned utilities. It is what they earn the highest profits on, the highest guaranteed rate of return. Maine Power Reliability Project, we are paying them across the country, across the ISO, we're paying 13% roughly for that investment of funds. And so the transmission, the ownership of the transmission would also change hands, and it would save significant money for Maine ratepayers for that reason, because it is such a lucrative aspect of the current utilities business models.
The other question was in relation to that.
Yep.
You still need some level of, you might not call it profit, maybe you would, but your public entity would still need some level of profit to be able to make investments, expansions, upgrades, all of that sort of thing. Would that be affected by this?
So there would, if rates were set a little bit too high by the utility and they were able to pay the bond banks the interest, which is probably right now Maine Turnpike Authority is borrowing at between 2 and 3%. So they're talking about a really low interest rate for a public entity like this. If they took in a little more than they expected, they would have two options. One would be to plow that extra money into reliability, upgrades to the grid. The other would be to put it into rate reductions. But there's no profit ability in the Maine Power Delivery Authority. They would, by statute, they would not have the ability to do anything other than increase the reliability or reduce the rates.
But I guess what I'm asking then, you're convinced the money would still be there to do those necessary upgrades?
Absolutely, it would be there because we'd stop sending hundreds of millions of dollars per year out of the country.
Related to that,
Yeah.
You would envision if the CMP Hydro-Quebec Western Main connector goes through, the state acquiring that project.
You know, all transmission means all transmission. Obviously, that proposal is a moving target, and there are many folks, including many here in the room, who are opposed to that and would like to see that it doesn't happen. So I don't think it's probably fruitful to talk about what would happen to an imaginary project. But you know, if it did, it would be transmission, and it would be purchased and owned by this utility.
What role would the PUC have in this whole process?
So the PUC would have the same role that it currently has with consumer-owned utilities. There is some level of oversight. Obviously, you don't need as much because the COUs are transparent. All of their meetings are held in public. They're subject to FOA, very different from the current utilities. So there's a little less need for heavy-handed regulation, and yet the PUC would be there to provide an additional check and balance, and that's a good thing.
Is this all a direct result of the CMP issues over the last year, or is this something you've been thinking about for a while?
It's something that I've been thinking about for a while. You know, when I came on to the committee back in 2007, the Energy Committee had a different name. The public advocate at the time was Dick Davies, who's sitting with us here today, speaking for ratepayers, a green plaid shirt right there. Yeah, talk to him afterwards. The utilities at the time were, or the CMP residential rates for transmission and distribution were close to half, but still less than half of our overall rates. It was generation that was costing more. Since that time, generation, the cost of the supply has come down significantly, even as we've brought online more renewable energy. But what's replaced that, and the reason that rates are in fact higher than they were then, is the T&D portion of the bill, the CMP or the AmeriMaine portion of the bill for the delivery. So they have driven up rates. They are the reason that when Governor LePage complained about our electricity costs, he was right. It's because of the transmission and distribution rates. So I've been thinking about this for a while. I've been watching that chart in my committee room, and the portion of the transmission and distribution is driving up our rates and saying, you know, we have to do something. This is crazy. Yeah. Other questions?
Political question.
Yes.
Obviously, this is a huge change.
It's big. Yep.
And I realize the bill's just coming out.
Right.
What level of support do you think there's going to be in the legislature to do this? And would you require a public vote?
The legislature would certainly need to approve it, and the governor. There could be a referendum component. We could send it out to the people and have them approve it. I suspect the people might just take matters into their own hands if we don't get it done in this building. But absolutely, it is important to me that this be, and that it started as a nonpartisan effort. It needs to continue it as a nonpartisan effort. Many of the folks behind me are Republicans, and I've been talking to others. I spoke to Senator Moore's support. Been speaking with Representative Phil Curtis, who is very familiar with both CMP and the Madison utility, having worked at both. There are other Republicans I've been speaking with, and it is very important that we work across the aisle and get this done. People need to see the language before they can sign on officially, and the language has not yet come out from the revisor's office. I'm hopeful that it will come out soon, but today I've distributed an outline of what the bill does. Everything that is in that outline is what's in the bill, and nothing will be in the bill that is not in that outline. So you can rest assured that you have the key points there, and I encourage you to look at it and grab a copy on your way out if you don't already have it. Other questions? Very good. Well, thank you all for coming, and forward.